We live in an age of profound and dizzying contradiction. We carry in our pockets a small glass rectangle that grants us access to the entirety of human knowledge, yet we have never felt less wise. We are connected, through a vast and invisible network, to thousands of people across the globe, able to witness the intimate details of their lives at any given moment. Yet we have never felt more profoundly and deeply alone. We have at our command an infinite library of entertainment, a seamless and algorithmically perfected stream of pleasures that never has to end, and yet we are haunted by a persistent, unshakable boredom, a quiet sense of emptiness that no amount of content can seem to fill. We are, by every historical measure, the most empowered and connected civilization to have ever existed. So why do so many of us feel so weak, so disconnected, and so incredibly lost? This feeling of contradiction has given rise to a new way of being in the world. We have become digital ghosts. Our presence is undeniable, but our substance has become thin, transparent. We wake in the morning, and before we greet the day or even our own bodies, we reach for the phone to check on the status of our digital self, the comments, the likes, the emails. We walk down the street, but we are not truly there. We are adrift in a podcast or an audiobook. We sit at a dinner table with the people we love, but we are not fully present. A part of our attention, a significant part, remains tethered to the endless, urgent conversation happening in the global hive mind. Our bodies are here, but our souls are elsewhere, scattered across a dozen different apps and 100 different feeds. We feel a constant, low-grade exhaustion from this state of being, this relentless performance of presence in a world where we feel profoundly absent. And we treat the symptoms as if they were the disease. We diagnose ourselves with a lack of focus, with anxiety, with social media addiction. We search for solutions, a new productivity app, a digital detox weekend, a mindfulness practice that promises to bring us back to the present moment. We treat these feelings as personal failings, as bugs in our own psychological software that need to be patched and updated. But what if these are not separate problems at all? What if the loneliness, the fractured attention, the chronic boredom, and the deep sense of unreality are all symptoms of a single vast and underlying condition? A condition we have been unable to name because it is the very air we breathe, the very water in which we swim. What if the very tools we built to connect, to empower, and to entertain us are, in fact, the silent and efficient architects of a slow and almost imperceptible decline? This video is an investigation into this possibility. It is the story of how the digital age, with all of its undeniable wonders and conveniences, may be facilitating the slow death of the human soul. When we speak of the soul in this context, we are not speaking of a religious or metaphysical entity. We are speaking of the collection of uniquely human capacities that constitute our inner world, the ability for deep, sustained focus and contemplation, the capacity for rich, empathetic, and unmediated connection with another person, the existence of a stable and private interior self, where our memories, our imagination, and our authentic values reside. These capacities are not indestructible. They are like muscles. And the central thesis of our investigation is that the environment of the digital age is causing these muscles to profoundly and perhaps permanently atrophy. Let's begin with the very architecture of our thought. In his book, The Shallows, the writer Nicholas Carr makes a powerful argument based on the science of neuroplasticity. The tools we use to think physically change the structure of our brains. For centuries, the dominant intellectual technology was the printed book. The act of reading a book trained the mind to be linear, to be focused, to follow a long and complex argument, and to be comfortable with quiet, deep contemplation. It created what Carr calls the literary mind. The internet, however, is a different kind of machine, and it is shaping a different kind of mind. It is a system of interruption and distraction. It rewards the rapid-fire scanning of headlines, the jumping between a dozen different tabs, and the constant hunger for the next new stimulus. It is training our brains to value breadth over depth, immediacy over patience. The result is that our very capacity for deep, contemplative thought is eroding on a biological level. The soul's muscle of focus is withering away from lack of use. Next, let us examine our connection to others. The sociologist Sherry Turkle has spent her career studying our relationship with technology at MIT. In her book Alone Together, she argues that we have systematically sacrificed the richness of conversation for the ease of mere connection. Real face-to-face conversation is slow, it is messy, it is unpredictable. It requires us to be vulnerable, to listen, and to engage with the full, unedited, and often awkward humanity of another person in real time. Digital connection, by contrast, is clean, fast, and safe. It allows us to edit, to curate, and to present a perfect version of ourselves. We can send a perfectly crafted text message. We can signal our support with an emoji. We can perform empathy without having to do the hard and messy work of actually feeling it with another human being. The result is that we are becoming masters of the performance of intimacy, while our actual capacity for it begins to atrophy. The soul's need for genuine, unmediated communion is being starved and replaced by the junk food of shallow digital validation. Finally, let us look at our place in society. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues that the digital world has dissolved the old public and replaced it with a digital swarm. The public was a structured and rational entity. The swarm is a chaotic and emotional one. It is a mass of isolated individuals, connected only by a shared, fleeting, and often outraged emotion. The swarm does not act, it reacts. It does not engage in reasoned discourse. It communicates in storms of outrage or approval. Within the swarm, there is no stable we, only a temporary and hysterical aggregation of individual I's. This environment, he argues, erodes our individuality and our capacity for rational thought. To survive in the swarm, we must be constantly reactive, constantly performing, constantly signaling our allegiance to the emotion of the moment. The quiet, stable, and sovereign inner self, the very definition of the soul, is drowned out by the endless, meaningless noise. The death of the soul is not a dramatic or sudden event. It is a quiet fading. It is a slow, almost imperceptible process of erosion. For me, the first terrifying recognition of my own fading came not in a moment of crisis, but in a moment of what should have been perfect peace. I had gone on a trip, a deliberate escape into nature, for the sole purpose of disconnecting. I had found a spot overlooking a vast, silent valley as the sun began to set. The view was sublime, the kind of profound beauty that is supposed to quiet the mind and fill the soul with a sense of awe. And for a few brief moments, it worked. I felt a sense of peace, a connection to something larger than myself. But then, it began. A quiet, almost imperceptible restlessness, an itch, a sense of boredom. The slow, majestic pace of the real world, the gradual shifting of the light, the silent movement of the clouds, was not stimulating enough for my conditioned mind. My internal monologue, which had been silent for a moment, began to stir with its usual anxieties. What should I be thinking about right now? Am I appreciating this correctly? What's happening in the world? My mind, deprived of its usual high-velocity stream of information, began to panic. And then came the reflex. My hand, as if with a mind of its own, reached for my pocket. My fingers twitched, searching for the smooth, cold glass of my phone. A rational voice in my head protested, "Don't. This is the very thing you came here to escape." But the pull, the addiction was stronger. I told myself it was just to take a picture, to capture the moment. But this was a lie, a negotiation tactic with myself. I pulled out the phone and took the photo. And then, without a conscious decision, as if my fingers were being guided by an invisible force, they opened the email app, then a news app, then a social media feed. And just like that, the sublime, singular beauty of the sunset was gone, replaced by the familiar, comfortable, and infinitely less demanding glow of the screen. When I finally looked up again, the best of the light had faded. And in that moment of gray twilight, I was struck by a sense of self-loathing so profound it almost buckled my knees. I was confronted with a devastating truth. I was no longer in control. My attention, was not my own. It had been colonized by a machine that I had willingly invited into my life. And the deeper, more terrifying realization was this: I had forgotten how to be bored. I had lost the capacity to simply be present with myself and the world in a moment of quiet, unstructured stillness. My mind had become so accustomed to being fed a constant stream of external stimulus that, when confronted with the beautiful silence of reality, it did not know what to do with itself. My inner world, the place that should have been rich with imagination, memory, and introspection, had atrophied. It had been so consistently and thoroughly neglected in favor of the endless, effortless stream of external content that it had gone silent. There was nothing to do in the quiet because the inside had become hollow. I had, in a very real sense, outsourced my own interiority. My ability to generate my own thoughts, to sit with my own feelings, to simply be, had been traded for the convenience of having a machine do it for me. I saw in that moment that my fractured attention wasn't just a productivity problem, it was an existence problem. The digital ghost I had been warned about was not a future possibility. It was me, standing on a mountain, staring at a screen, completely and utterly alone. To recognize the slow atrophy of your own soul is a devastating moment. The scale of the problem feels so immense, so baked into the very fabric of our society, that the only logical response can feel like a dramatic and total rejection. We are tempted by the fantasy of the digital detox, of throwing our smartphones into a river and moving to a cabin in the woods. But these grand gestures are often just another form of escapism, a temporary fix that fails to address the deep-seated habits of our own minds. The true path forward is not a single violent revolution. It is a quiet, gentle, and consistent rebellion, a series of small, deliberate practices designed to patiently reclaim the lost territory of your inner world. The first practice is a form of modern asceticism. You must create sacred spaces of digital scarcity. In a world of overwhelming 24/7 abundance, the most valuable resource is no longer information. It is the absence of it. An ascetic is not someone who punishes themselves, but someone who understands that the deliberate creation of scarcity can lead to a richer spiritual life. You must become an architect of your own scarcity. This begins by creating sacred times and sacred spaces that are declared as no-phone zones. The first hour of your day, for example. Make a sacred vow that the first voice you hear in the morning is your own, not the chaotic chorus of the internet. The second sacred space could be the dinner table. To eat a meal without a screen is a radical act of presence, both with your food and with the people you are sharing it with. And perhaps the most important of all, the bedroom. Your bedroom should be a monastery for sleep and intimacy, not another node in the global information network. This is not a temporary detox. It is a permanent re-architecting of your life. You are building small islands of quiet in the middle of a very noisy world. The second practice is a direct assault on the fractured mind. You must embrace the discipline of monotasking. The internet has trained our brains to be brilliant at processing vast amounts of information in a shallow and rapid way. The rebellion against this is the simple, profound, and at first deeply uncomfortable act of doing only one thing at a time. This is a form of attentional training, a meditation for the scattered mind. When you read a book, just read the book. Put your phone in another room. Turn off the music. Resist the urge to check your email. For 15 minutes, give the book the sacred gift of your full, undivided attention. When you go for a walk, just walk. Leave the podcast and the audiobook at home. Pay attention to the feeling of your feet on the ground, to the sounds of your neighborhood, to the quality of the light. When you speak with another human being, just speak with them. Put your phone away where you cannot see it or feel it vibrate. This practice will be difficult. Your mind, conditioned for constant novelty, will itch for its next hit of stimulus. But with every small victory, you are rebuilding the atrophied muscle of deep focus. You are remembering how to be present in your own life. Finally, you must cultivate analog rituals. As the philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues, the digital world is a world of transient, frictionless information. The soul, however, craves structure, repetition, and symbolic meaning. A ritual is an action that is imbued with intention and attention that connects us to something deeper than the task itself. The practice is to consciously introduce small, stable, and non-digital rituals into your daily life. It could be the ritual of making your morning coffee using a manual method, like a pour-over or a French press, focusing entirely on the sounds, the smells, and the process. It could be the ritual of writing a single page in a physical journal before you go to sleep, a final, quiet act of communion with your own thoughts. It could be the ritual of a weekly walk along the same path in a local park, a way of grounding yourself in the slow, patient, and cyclical rhythms of the natural world. These rituals are anchors. They are predictable islands of meaning in the chaotic, ever-changing ocean of the digital swarm. They are the slow, patient work of building a durable home for your soul once again. We began this journey with the haunting image of the digital ghost, a being of perfect connection and infinite information, who has become a stranger to their own life. We have seen how the very architecture of our modern world, with its obsession with frictionless smoothness and its constant hijacking of our brain's reward systems, creates the perfect conditions for the soul to wither and fade. It would be easy to end in a state of technological despair, to see ourselves as the helpless victims of a system far too powerful to resist. But that is a form of passive surrender. The slow death of the soul is not a technological inevitability. It is a personal choice, a choice that we make every time we opt for the easy comfort of the digital simulation over the difficult, messy, and vibrant reality of our own embodied lives. The rebellion against this slow death is not a war against technology. We do not need to smash our screens and retreat from the modern world in a fit of romantic Luddism. The rebellion is a war for proper alignment. It is the quiet, daily, and determined struggle to put our tools back in their proper place. The goal is to see our digital life not as the world itself, but as a small, useful satellite, orbiting the great, beautiful, and complex planet of our real physical existence. For too many of us, the satellite has grown so large and so bright that it has blotted out the sun. The return of the real is the conscious effort to reverse this, to shrink the satellite back to its proper size. It is the choice to value the awkward, unedited conversation with the person in front of you more than the polished, witty conversations in your pocket. It is the choice to value the quiet, fertile wisdom of your own boredom over the endless, entertaining noise of the feed. The fight for the human soul in the digital age is the great, quiet battle of our time, and it is won in the small choices we make every day. If you are ready to reclaim your focus, your presence, and your inner world, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. And now, let us begin the work together. Share one small analog ritual you will commit to this week to create a space of quiet in your life in the comments below. Your answer is not just a comment. It is a vote for the real world.